Hello, everyone. Today we'll be talking about words that change minds. The waking hypnosis, if you will, underneath the work of two guys. One is Chris Voss and Chase Hughes. Chris Voss was the lead kidnap hostage negotiator for the FBI for, I think, eight or 10 years. And Chase Hughes did something in the intelligence field. It's pretty cool stuff. But we're going to go a little bit deeper, because what I always say is what happens with this is people, they learn waking hypnosis, NLP, great. That'll change everything for 90% of everything, right? And then, of course, some people learn maybe like this, the negotiation skills, right? Unfortunately, people are still learning old negotiation protocols that really don't work anymore, but they're still being taught, But even learning those, even some of the more cutting edge negotiation techniques, or they learn even some of the profiling stuff. But of course, there's several different kinds of profiling. When I say that, people they default to the different types of personality profiles. This one's much different, and it's based on what your social drivers are. So it's more of a social personality profile. Right? And then some tying it together with the waking hypnosis and NLP, then it gets to be like magic, the really cool stuff, in my opinion. So before we start, I always like to start with questions because it warms up the brain. So the first question is, when someone's lying to you, where do you feel it first? Or when you think they're lying to you, you don't know if they're lying. Or sometimes you know they're lying because you know the truth, Where do you feel it first? And that would be the Chase Hughes. It's like a semantic tell. It's in your body. What's the last conversation you watched go sideways and you couldn't stop it? Right? It just kind of got off on its own, right? And that would be more in the Chris Voss negotiation thing, where you mislabel what the other person's doing or saying, and it takes on a life of its own. And if you could plant one sentence in someone's mind and take root for you, what would it do for you? So, this is the old, and I know this is a repeat for a lot of us, but I found out we're getting a lot of business people, especially there's a sales page this gets posted on, that aren't really into hypnosis, the formal stuff. Or, like everyone here knows, especially Karen and Billy, people that have taught hypnosis can tell you, the worst part is when people don't know, but they think they know. I can't be hypnotized. I'm strong-willed. I can't do this. Of course, my comeback always was, well, there's two types been proven can't be hypnotized: sociopathic, narcissist, and people with low functioning IQ. I'm not sure which you are, but anyway, so what people think, you need a dim room, you need, some kind of fixation thing, the old swinging watch, which, by the way, works. I still think it's cool. But, but you think you need it, right? But actually, the best trances happen when your eyes are wide awake, open, watching a movie, right? You suspend disbelief just as easy with your eyes open as you do with your eyes closed, right? And some people think you have to go to sleep, of course, or you lose control, right? But really what happens when you relax is it's easier to get to what Chris Voss calls that's right. When you're talking to somebody, trying to get them to agree with you, agree or get some kind of compliance, I like that term, you never want to hear yes, because there's three kinds of yes: the placating yes, the yes, I agree with you, doesn't mean I'm going to do it. And then there's the yes, I agree with you and I'll do it. But that's like the difference between when someone says you're right and that's right. It's a subtle difference in your head if you think about it. Because someone will say, you should eat healthy, exercise, not smoke, all this stuff. And people go, you're right. Doesn't mean they're going to do it. It's You see it all the time. But if they say that's right, it usually means, okay, you're right. But and they're beginning to see that they should do it, if that makes sense to everybody, right? And I know if you get a book, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, I forget the other writer's name, uh, but he talks about once he got the person he was negotiating, these are people with kidnaps, usually terrorists or crime groups or bad things. Once they said that's right, he knew they'd turn the corner. You know, not you're right. Like, hey, Billy, I know you got a gun and you got hostages. You're not going to get out of here alive. You know, and if they could say you're right, well, that's one thing. But when they, it's these little things, right? You want to only work on suggestible people. And I know all of us here that's done the, hypnosis training and trainers training, or, how to really train people. It's actually the opposite. Everyone's suggestible to a point. Just like I was talking to somebody the other day because they called about this class, and they kind of said that, and they go, well, you can't get people to do things they don't want to do. I go, au contraire. Au contraire. That's assuming there's things they won't do. Given the right circumstances, what would you do? The thing, when I learned it, this guy made which was, I found out later at the National Guild, the White Damon said, you shouldn't be talking about that. He goes, no, it'd be easy to get somebody to shoot somebody if you could plant the right scenario. There's a true bad person with a knife to someone's throat. You might take different action. But anyway, it's these scenarios, right? But the magic words, I love my magic words. All of you know that, right? I know Karen loves them. I just do 5, and the 6, the magic one, I saved for later, which is naturally, right? But I'll link it to what to the approach of what we're talking about with tactical influence. So it sounds like you're naturally worried about, right? That's a label. Like if I know Billy's a, person that worries about loss, like losing money, hey, well, Billy, it sounds like you're naturally worried about what you could lose here. What's your exposure? Right? You never say, I think, you say, it sounds like, right? And if we throw in naturally, or it looks like any of our VAK stuff, significance people, easily is a great word for them. Significance types can easily feel unseen. So if I know someone really wants to be significant, Bruce, I know your biggest fear, or Bruce, it seems like to me, nope, I did it again. Damn, I still got to work on it. Bruce, it seems that being unseen is the worst thing that can happen to you. So when you're dealing with the board and they act like you're not there, does that trigger you? So it's like you're, and easily, fits in there. You'll effortlessly notice patterns once shown. In fact, once you learn this, just like all of us that learned the basic started in NLP, not hypnosis, the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, toward, away from, those things. Once you notice them, you can't not see them. They just start popping up. All these years later, I'll be watching a commercial, and it's first thing I think is, are they moving toward a goal or away from pain? Right? What are they trying to do here? Right? And once you notice these patterns, then you learn the naturally, easily, effortlessly, notice, realize, awareness. Once you notice those words, you can't not notice them. Right? You can put them on the back burner, but they're there. Same, and again, like notice, right? And realize, realize or aware. Once you become aware, someone needs recognition. It'll set someone off. And once we get into this stuff, it's fascinating, right? Well, Chris Voss doesn't speak about hypnosis per se. I know he's taken some intro classes from what I've heard. Excuse me, but he uses it, right? And again, he calls it labeling. You know, he calls it mirroring, and really for him, it's not just the physical mirroring and matching. It's like, you know, labeling the emotion that you perceive the person's going through, or labeling what the fear is. First, I know you're just worried about that I'm just going to pitch you another course, and then you just keep going, right? Well, it like puts it out in the open, right? Because if that's a program running, right? And of course, if you've been on the other calls, I always say the coolest thing is the how am I supposed to do that pattern? I would call it. Yeah, hey Karen, you could take this class. It's only $4,000, right? And if she goes, well, I'm sorry, but how am I? It's a great offer. Thank you very much. How am I supposed to do that? It would cause the person you're talking to flip into helping you solve the problem of how, or reveal they don't care. I use that example when I was looking at a car, and I told that to the person on the phone. I go, I'm sorry, how am I supposed to do that? Well, I called 3 dealerships, right? A Honda and 2 Toyota dealerships. And the Honda and one of the Toyotas, well, we'll work that out. We could do this. They were wanting to help. One goes, I don't know, that's not our problem. Right? Well, I know Toyotas are selling well with the gas thing going on, but I'm like, I don't know if I want to go in there, right? And again, Chris Hughes or Chris Voss calls it the accusation audit. You just say what you think the other person might be feeling about you or thinking about you or your offer, right? And if you say the fear first, it flips something in people's brains. He's got some good videos where he talks about like he was, some big, kidnapping situation in the Philippines with terrorists and all this. And he would say, you probably just think you're not going to get out of here alive. Well, that was the big fear, right? And he goes, but, I'm here to work, whatever happened. But it was like some really cool stuff, right? That begins to flip it. And I've beaten this up a lot in the last couple of years again, which is Chase Hughes, social psychological profiling, right? That this is what you seek, especially in a group, because we're group animals, we're herd animals, we're part of a pack, however you want to word it, right? And this is just how we operate. Some people want to be, and you have all of these. This again for us NLPers and hypnotists, when you first learn it, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, people go, I'm a visual, I'm an auditory, I'm a kinesthetic. You use all of your senses. It could be a little bit, nuanced, right? But you do have some primary things that you use and secondary. And it's the same with this, right? So you have people that are driven by significance. They want to be different than everybody else. It's, again, not to pick on you, but if you got a Rolex and you have to let people see your Rolex, right? That's to let people know that you're significant, right? Or you have to talk about your Bentley, right? Whatever it happens to be, right? And kind of goes with significance or strength people. And again, you don't really have to be significant. You just want to appear significant, right? And it's the same with strength people. People that want to appear strong, it doesn't mean they're really strong physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually even, but they want to appear strong. Again, I was at the gym. I think I told this story, but some guy was just benching, on the Smith machine. And he jumped up after he benched and he was all proud because he goes, I set a personal record. I think it was like 315, which I'm pretty impressed. He wasn't that big a guy. And another guy went, yeah, back when I was training hard, that was my warm up. Well, you know, first he's trying to be significant and show you he's strong, right? So anyway, but you're driven by these things, right? And their big fear is not being significant or not being seen as strong, right? And then we have the approval people, the people that want approval at all costs, and they'll seek approval even when it's not needed. It's a given. If you're, I always tell the story. Karen can probably relate this. You're in your op. If you're seeing people live, as opposed to dead people, that's a different. That's the Sixth Sense, or what was that other movie where it was dead people walking around? But you're in the office and next to the client's chair, there's Kleenex because people cry and they just cry. But then they have to ask you, Billy, is it okay if I use a Kleenex? I mean, they're seeking the approval, right? Which means their big fear is not being approved. And again, if you want to be Freudian, you could go back to all these. At one point in your life, you weren't seen as significant. At one point in your life, you weren't seen as, you didn't get the approval, right? Or acceptance. Those approval and acceptance kind of go close together, right? And these are the people that once they get into a group, their biggest fear is being kicked out of that group, right? And the group, especially if it's cult-like, will really harbor that over you. Karen's aware of a few of these kind of people you see in the hypnosis world. And so is Billy, and so is Michelle, So it's kind of fun, and if somebody that doesn't care about approval and acceptance, well, you were in that group and then you left. How does that make you feel? I don't give a shit. I was never driven that much by approval or acceptance, right? But it'll be important to me at times, though. I say everything's nuanced, right? Then you have the pity people, is they kind of get stuck into that where, it's not my fault. I've got it rough. I got it rougher than everybody else, yada, 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 And they may have legitimate reasons for feeling, you can't just judge them right off the bat. Maybe there's things situationally that'll put you into it, right? And the other big group is intelligence people, right? They want to be seen as smart. And again, I think I've said it several times, but how do you know someone went to Harvard? They tell you, right? Oh, the other one they want to see it's strength and intelligence, right? And it has to do with veterans. If there's one group of veterans that's driven by those two significance, strength, and intelligence, it's the United States Marine Corps. Right, Patrick? It's like, we're significant, we're different, we're the few, the proud, yada, 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 so it's kind of interesting, but you get all of these, right? But the most powerful sentence structure to me in NLP, I've went back to it, is the more, right? The more you think about this, the more you'll find yourself wanting to do it now. The more you look for reasons to resist, the more you find reasons to sign up today, right? You're linking two things which probably don't go together. The more you want to say, the more you want to say no, the more you find yourself saying yes. It sounds dumb when you're breaking it down, but it works. Naturally smart people, Billy, understand the true need that the more they think about it, the more they have to sign up quickly. Right? Whatever. It doesn't have to make any sense, right? And that's the way it was, taught to me, is doesn't have to make sense, like a lot of our language patterns. Oops. All right, we're getting there. All right. And, as you naturally realize, you felt this before, it's easy to see why that conversation slips. And effortlessly, you begin to notice exactly what to say so it never happens again. And again, where you feel a lie. There's been many times, David, up in Tennessee, that you just knew somebody was not being truthful with you. And where did you feel that in your body? Because if you check now, you'll find it's not there when it comes to thinking about this. So, you know, and you can have a lot of fun with this kind of stuff, right? And so this is one day of the training. We'll really dive into this even more. But what's kind of cool is I've kind of tweaked it a little bit. But again, a lot of this, those of us that's taken waking hypnosis, especially through NFNLP, we're the ones that kind of started teaching it with the language, naturally, easily, effortlessly, before, after, during, all of those things. And even the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, toward, all that stuff. We will be reviewing it somewhat, because when you first go to a lot of seminars, and I always think of karate is the best example. When I was going to a lot of karate seminars, you'd always spend the first hour, usually it started Friday night, went Saturday, Sunday. You'd spend the first hour when you got there, and first hour of each morning, just reviewing the basics. Front kick, back kick, side kick, how you throw a punch, reverse punch, backhand, all these little punches, or whatever it is. It was basics. And you're looking around the room, and most of the people in the room are black belts, and most of them own dojos, right? But it's the basic techniques that you let slip that will get you every time. It's like you mean to do it, and it's the idea of continuous review of the basics. Okay? I mean, I was just watching. They were. I don't really watch sports that much anymore, but they were on a sports. I was up north, and the sports thing came on, and they were talking about the NFL the first camps, right? And they're asking the coach, "What are you doing?" Optional training activities, I think they call it, right? Which is optional to the point where if you don't show up, you probably don't have a job for most of the people. But he goes, well, the first day we're just going over the basics: blocking, tackling, throwing, catching. You're thinking, these are the best football players on the planet. And he goes, but because someone said that, shouldn't you be working on? He goes, no, we got to get back to the basics before we build back up. Right. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of the fields skip that part. I know I have to get 40 hours of CEUs every other year for my one license. Then I have to get 20 hours that's not related for my other thing, for my master certified addiction profession. And it's like, why are they making me take this? I've been doing this, 3/4 of my life, for God's sakes, right? Well, it puts me back. I have to take a class. I have to read. And a lot of it, I made the mental note. It's right here. I had to write it down because my mental note fades quicker than the page. For my psych license in both states that I'm licensed in, you always have to take laws and ethics, and you always had to take stopping medical errors, right? And it hasn't changed that much, but you're reviewing it. Oh, now they make you take confidentiality classes, with the new HIPAA rules, right? And it's like, okay. So it's kind of cool. So what we'll be doing in this training is a 5-day live training, noon to about 1:15 every day, noon Eastern. And it's a 5-day training. Then we'll get the toolkit, and it's all created as a field manual, right? And I like what you use when you're out in the field, and to use military analogy, you don't need the whole big manual when you're out in the field. You just need what makes it work, the troubleshooting guide, what's going to, Why won't the helicopter fly? You know, so you could, is the drive shaft connected to the from the turbine to the rotor? That's a big one. So anyway, you can have some fun with it. And again, it's 75% off this week. If you want more, just give me a call and reach out wherever you're getting this, and I'll talk to you soon.
What if everything you've been taught about influence was backwards? Imagine for a moment, you walk into a room, you say almost nothing, and yet everyone leans in. That's not charisma, that's code. And when you learn it, really feel how simple it actually is, you'll wonder how you ever talked without it. I'm Dr. Will Horton, psychologist, FBI-trained negotiator, 40 years of NLP and hypnosis, and much more. And now I've cracked the code on tactical influence, and this month I'm handing it to you live. Just notice what happens when you really decide to show up. I hope you haven't given up on being elite. The link is below.